My name is Odessa, 28 years old, and until last month I was an art teacher in Chicago. I came back to Boston to care for my dad after his heart attack, moving back into my childhood home. Growing up with my mum, Jessica, was like walking on eggshells every day. Last week I finally stood up to her manipulative control by exposing family secrets she had hidden for years. That evening, my phone buzzed with her text. "We changed all the locks. You do not have a home anymore. Let us see how brave you are now. Haha." Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe to follow my journey toward healing. I grew up in a beautiful colonial-style house in suburban Boston, the kind with perfectly manicured lawns and a reputation to maintain. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. My father, Robert, was a successful architect. My mother, Jessica, was active in all the right social circles, and I was their only child expected to fulfill all their hopes and dreams. But behind our glossy front door, things were different. My mother ruled our home with ironclad control disguised as love and concern. Every decision, from what we ate for dinner to what color my bedroom walls could be, ultimately needed her approval. My father, though, financially successful and respected in his field, seemed to shrink in her presence, choosing peace over confrontation. My earliest memories involve creating art. I would spend hours with colored pencils and paper, losing myself in worlds I could control when my reality felt so restricted. By age 7, my elementary school teachers were calling me gifted. My father would beam with pride, carefully framing my artwork and hanging it in his home office. My mother, however, had different ideas about my future. "Art is a hobby, Odessa, not a career," she would say dismissively. "We did not work this hard to raise a daughter who will struggle to pay her bills. You will be a doctor or lawyer like the Williams daughter next door." When report cards came, my straight A's in academic subjects were merely expected, but my art teacher's glowing comments about my potential were met with tight-lipped smiles from Jessica. "That is nice, but how are your science scores? That is what will get you into Harvard." My father, Robert, would occasionally stand up for me in small ways. "Let her enjoy her painting, Jess. She is just a child," he would say quietly when my mother scheduled extra math tutoring over my Saturday morning art class. But these small rebellions were quickly squashed. "Do you want her to end up struggling like your sister?" Jessica would fire back, referring to my Aunt Susan, who worked as a gallery curator in New York. Despite my aunt having a fulfilling career, she loved in my mother's narrative. Anyone making less than 6 figures was a failure. As I moved into my teenage years, Jessica's methods of control became more sophisticated. She mastered emotional manipulation, using guilt, subtle threats, and gaslighting to keep both my father and me in line. When I was 14 and wanted to attend a weekend art camp, she sighed dramatically. "After everything I do for this family, this is how you repay me, by wanting to waste money on finger painting when you should be preparing for your future." Then came the tears, followed by the silent treatment for days. If I tried standing my ground, questioning her decisions, she would twist my words until I doubted my own memory. "I never said you could not go to Sarah's birthday. I said we would see, and then you never mentioned it again. Do not try to make me the bad guy because you forgot." The most effective tool in her arsenal was her public persona versus her private behavior. To neighbors, teachers, family friends, she was charming, generous, the perfect mother concerned about her daughter's future. She would volunteer for school functions, host dinner parties, and speak proudly about my accomplishments to others, while simultaneously undermining my confidence at home. "Everyone thinks you are so special with your little drawings," she would say after someone complimented my art. "If only they knew how lazy you are about the things that really matter." When I turned 18, I received an acceptance letter to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with a partial scholarship. My father secretly helped me apply, knowing Jessica would disapprove. When the thick envelope arrived, I felt real hope for the first time. Jessica's reaction was predictably volcanic. She tore up the acceptance letter in front of me. "No daughter of mine is wasting her life on this nonsense," she declared. That night, my father came to my room after she went to bed. He handed me a check, a letter of recommendation he had written, and a duplicate acceptance package he had asked the school to send to his office address. "Go," he whispered. "Live your life, Odessa. I will handle your mother." I left the next week with Jessica barely speaking to me. My goodbye with my father was quick, tearful, and secretive. "I will call when I can," he promised. During my college years, contact with home was minimal. Jessica would answer when I called, giving one-word responses before passing the phone to my father. Holidays were tense affairs when I visited, so eventually I stopped coming home, creating excuses about work and study commitments. I built a new life in Chicago far from Jessica's control. I found an apartment with roommates, worked part-time jobs to supplement my scholarship, and threw myself into my studies. For the first time, I felt I could breathe, laugh, create without judgment. After graduation, I secured a position as an art teacher at a progressive private school, found a small but charming apartment of my own, and even began showing my work in local galleries. 10 years passed this way, with occasional phone calls to my father, brief civil conversations with my mother, and a comfortable distance between my past and present. I had friends, a career I loved, and the freedom to be myself without constant criticism. Then came the call that changed everything. "Odessa, it is Dad. I have had a heart attack. They are saying I need bypass surgery." His voice sounded weak, scared. In the background, I could hear my mother giving instructions to someone. "I am coming home," I said without hesitation. My mother got on the phone. "He will be fine. You do not need to interrupt your life." Her tone suggested both dismissal and challenge. "I will be there tomorrow," I replied firmly. I took a leave of absence from my teaching position, packed enough for a few weeks, and flew back to Boston the next morning. I had no idea I was walking back into the lion's den, or that the next few months would force me to confront not just my mother's control, but decades of family secrets that would ultimately leave me locked out of my own home. When my rideshare pulled up to the familiar colonial house, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and dread. The maple tree I had climbed as a child still stood proudly in the front yard, but somehow the house itself seemed smaller, more oppressive than in my memories. Jessica opened the door before I could knock, her expression a carefully composed mask of concerned motherhood. "You did not need to come all this way," she said by way of greeting, giving me a stiff hug that felt more like a formal obligation than a welcome. "Robert is stable. The doctors say the surgery went well." I stepped inside, noticing how little had changed. The same formal furniture, the same family photos on the wall, all carefully selected to present the image Jessica wanted the world to see. None of my artwork was displayed, though I had sent several pieces over the years as gifts. "Where is Dad?" I asked, setting down my suitcase. "Resting upstairs. Do not disturb him. He needs his sleep." She gestured toward the kitchen. "I have made up your old room. While you are here, I expect you to help with the household. Your father needs proper nutrition and a stress-free environment for his recovery." Within minutes of arrival, Jessica had already established the power dynamic she intended to maintain. I was not a 30-year-old professional returning to help my family. I was a child back under her roof, subject to her rules. "I would like to see Dad first," I said, heading toward the stairs. Jessica stepped in front of me. "Rules while you are here, Odessa. Dinner is at 6 sharp. Quiet hours begin at 9 for your father's rest. You will help with meals and housekeeping, and I expect you to respect our privacy. No posting about family matters online." I bit back the retort that sprang to my lips. I was here for my father, not to reignite old battles. "Fine," I said tersely. "Can I see him now?" She nodded once, then led the way upstairs like I was a visitor who might get lost in my childhood home. Dad looked frail against the white sheets, his normally robust frame diminished. His face brightened when he saw me, though, and he held out a hand. "Odessa, you came." His voice was weaker than on the phone, and a web of monitoring wires connected him to a portable machine beside the bed. "Of course I came." I sat beside him, noticing how Jessica hovered in the doorway, monitoring our interaction. "How are you feeling?" "Like an elephant sat on my chest." He attempted a joke. "But better now that you are here." Jessica cleared her throat. 10 minutes. Then he needs his medication and rest. When she left to get water, Dad squeezed my hand. "Thank you for coming, sweetheart. I have missed you." Over the next week, I settled into an uneasy routine. Jessica had established herself as Dad's primary caregiver, controlling his medication schedule, his visitors, even what information the doctors shared directly with him versus through her. I swallowed my pride and followed her rules, helping with cooking, cleaning, and household management, while trying to spend quality time with Dad during his increasingly longer periods of wakefulness. The dynamic was exhausting. Jessica insisted on being the gatekeeper between Dad and the outside world, including me. If I suggested taking him for a short walk in the garden as he regained strength, she would counter that the pollen would aggravate his condition. If I brought him a book I thought he would enjoy, she would question whether the content might be too stimulating. The silver lining was the quiet conversations Dad and I managed when Jessica was occupied with her social commitments, which she maintained, despite claiming Dad required constant care. During these precious moments, I saw glimpses of the father I remembered from childhood, the man who had encouraged my creativity and independence, before gradually surrendering to Jessica's dominant personality. I should have been stronger, he confessed during one of these moments about 2 weeks into my stay. For you, I should have stood up to her more. Why did you stay? I asked the question I had wondered throughout my adult life. He looked toward the window, silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Fear, habit, guilt, 1,000 small surrenders that became too big to take back. His eyes met mine, and love in its way. We had good times too in the beginning. As Dad's physical strength returned, so did his spirit. He began asking more questions about my life in Chicago, my art, my friends. He kept a small sketchbook I had brought him, hidden in his nightstand, asking me to describe different places I had visited, so he could draw them, a hobby Jessica had always considered frivolous for a grown man. 3 weeks into my stay, I ran into Mia Greenwood at the local grocery store. We had been inseparable in elementary school before Jessica decided Mia's family wasn't ambitious enough for her daughter to associate with. Odessa. She embraced me warmly, her genuine pleasure at seeing me a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere at home. I heard you were back in town. How long are you staying? Over coffee, I explained about Dad's condition and my leave of absence from teaching. Mia's expression grew troubled. That is strange. Your mum told everyone you refused to come home when your dad first got sick. She made it sound like you only showed up weeks later when forced to. My stomach tightened. What, I came the day after he called me? That is not the story around town, Mia said carefully. Jessica has been telling everyone how heartbroken your dad was, that you did not come right away, how she had to practically beg you to visit. This was my first concrete evidence of what I had long suspected. Jessica actively worked to isolate me, to portray me as the ungrateful daughter, to maintain her image as the devoted, long-suffering mother. Back at the house, I began paying closer attention to Jessica's control mechanisms. She managed all household finances, including Dad's medical decisions, often signing forms on his behalf with the casual explanation that she was just saving him the trouble. One afternoon, while Jessica was at her weekly bridge game, I helped Dad organize his home office at his request. In a filing cabinet, I discovered years of financial statements showing Jessica had control over accounts I never knew existed. Dad seemed surprised by some of the information as well. I thought we closed that investment account years ago, he murmured, examining one statement. And what is this trust in your mother's name? I don't remember establishing that. The most disturbing discovery came when I found a box of mail addressed to me from my college years, items Jessica had apparently intercepted and hidden rather than forward. There were birthday cards from relatives with checks never cashed, letters from art competitions I had entered but never heard back from, even job offers from galleries that had contacted my parents' home after seeing my work in student exhibitions. Did you know about these, Amos? I asked Dad, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. He looked genuinely shocked. No, Odessa. I would have made sure you got these. I had no idea. That night, I set up a small studio space in my old bedroom, bringing in art supplies I had shipped from Chicago to use during my extended stay. Art had always been my therapy, my way of processing complex emotions. The next morning, I found my supplies packed back in their boxes, moved to the garage. We need your room for guests this weekend, Jessica explained smoothly when confronted. The fumes from your paints are not good for your father's recovery. No guests arrived that weekend. I began documenting Jessica's manipulations, keeping notes on my phone secured behind a password. I recorded dates, times, specific statements, and contradictions. The picture emerging was of a woman pathologically committed to control, willing to lie, gaslight, and emotionally manipulate to maintain her position of power in the family. As Dad grew stronger, spending more time with me and showing more independence from Jessica, her hostility increased. She accidentally deleted voicemails from my colleagues in Chicago. She misplaced mail addressed to me. She scheduled unnecessary appointments during times Dad and I had planned to visit a local art museum. The invisible war between us escalated with Dad caught in the middle, only now beginning to recognize the extent of Jessica's controlling behavior after decades of normalization. 5 weeks into my stay, I was helping Dad sort through old photographs when we discovered a hidden compartment in the bottom of his desk drawer. Inside was a bundle of letters from my grandmother Eleanor, his mother who had passed away during my freshman year of college. I never saw these, Dad said, puzzled, as he opened one letter dated just a month before Grandma Eleanor died. I watched his expression change from curiosity to shock as he read. "What is it?" I asked. "Mum left you her art collection and a trust fund for your education," he said slowly. "These letters say she tried to contact you directly but never heard back. She asked me to ensure you received your inheritance." "Okay." He looked up, his face pale. "I never knew about this, Odessa. Jessica handled all the correspondence with the lawyers after Mum died. She told me everything went to charity as planned." With trembling hands, I took the letters, reading through my grandmother's warm, encouraging words about my artistic talent, her pride in my college acceptance, her desire to support my future. Each letter was addressed to both Dad and me, yet I had never seen any of them. "There should have been money," Dad continued, digging deeper into the hidden compartment and pulling out legal documents. "A significant amount, and her art collection included several valuable pieces she wanted you to have." Over the next few days, we quietly investigated, careful to do our research when Jessica was out of the house. We discovered the existence of a family trust established by Grandma Eleanor, with Dad as primary beneficiary and me as secondary. Jessica, as Dad's wife, had been given management authority during his illness, but was never intended to be the sole controller of the assets. She told me the trust was minimal, just enough to cover property taxes. Dad said, his voice shaking with anger, as we reviewed bank statements, showing a balance nearly 20 times what Jessica had reported. More disturbing was our discovery of Dad's medical records, which I helped him access through the hospital's patient portal. His condition, while serious, had been exaggerated by Jessica in her calls to me. The emergency surgery had been successful, and his recovery timeline was expected to be weeks, not the months Jessica had implied when convincing me to take an extended leave from my job. "She wanted you here under her control again," Dad realized aloud. "But she also wanted to paint you as the reluctant daughter who only came because you had to." The final straw came when we found evidence that Jessica had been systematically selling off pieces of Grandma Eleanor's art collection, pieces legally intended for me, and depositing the funds into an account only she could access. I could no longer contain my anger. That evening, when Jessica returned from her volunteer committee meeting, I confronted her in the kitchen while Dad rested upstairs. "I know about Grandma Eleanor's trust," I said without preamble, "and her art collection that was meant for me." Jessica's expression flickered briefly before settling into calculated innocence. "What nonsense are you talking about? The letters, Mum, the legal documents, the art pieces you have been selling, we found everything." Her strategy shifted instantly from denial to justification. That old woman never understood what was best for this family. That money was needed for important things, not to be wasted on your little hobby. "It was legally mine," I countered. "You had no right." "I had every right." Her voice rose sharply. "I am the one who has kept this family together while you ran off to play artist in Chicago. I am the one who manages everything, makes every sacrifice. Your grandmother never respected that." When I mentioned the intercepted mail from my college years, Jessica's face hardened. "You were not ready for those opportunities. You would have failed, embarrassed the family name. I protected you." "You controlled me," I corrected. "And you have been controlling Dad for years." Jessica's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Be very careful, Odessa. You are a guest in my house. Actually, according to these documents, the house is primarily Dad's, and the trust gives me certain rights as well." She laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. "Your father would never go against me. He knows which side his bread is buttered on." I had not heard Dad enter the kitchen behind us. "That is where you are wrong, Jessica." Her head whipped around. The look of shock on her face would have been comical under different circumstances. "Robert, go back to bed. This does not concern you. Odessa is just stirring up trouble as usual." Dad stepped fully into the kitchen, standing straighter than I had seen since my return. "It absolutely concerns me. You have been lying to me for years, stealing from our daughter, manipulating both of us." Jessica's tactics shifted again, tears filling her eyes. "After all I have done for this family, I have only ever wanted what is best for everyone. What is best for you," Dad corrected quietly. "That is all this has ever been about." The confrontation escalated into the most honest conversation our family had ever had. Jessica alternated between tears, rage, accusations, and self-pity as Dad and I laid out the evidence of her years of deception. She accused me of turning my father against her, claimed I had never understood the sacrifices she had made, insisted everything she had done was out of love. When her emotional manipulations failed to regain control of the situation, she resorted to threats. Without me, this family falls apart. Who do you think has kept the bills paid? The appointments made? This house running? We will manage, Dad said firmly. Jessica pointed a finger at me. And you, if you push this, I will make sure everyone knows what an ungrateful, selfish daughter you have always been. I will contest any claim to the trust. I will fight you every step of the way. I stood my ground. I am not afraid of the truth coming out, Mom. Are you? She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming doors all the way to the master bedroom. Dad and I spent the rest of the evening talking through decades of manipulation, both of us processing the extent of Jessica's deception. He apologized repeatedly for not protecting me better, for not seeing through her behavior sooner. We will make this right, he promised, as I helped him back to his room for the night. Starting tomorrow, we contact a lawyer and get everything sorted properly. I went to bed that night with a strange mixture of grief and relief washing over me. The truth was finally out, painful as it was. I fell asleep planning our next steps, unaware that Jessica was already making moves to retaliate. The next morning, I woke early and drove to meet with Mia, who had practiced family law before opening her own firm specializing in elder care. I needed professional advice about the trust and my legal rights regarding Grandma Eleanor's inheritance. Our meeting ran long as Mia helped me understand the complex legal situation and my options moving forward. She agreed to look over the documents I had copied and give me a more formal assessment by the end of the week. This is serious, Odessa, she warned as I prepared to leave. Financial manipulation of trusts, potential elder abuse given your father's medical condition and her control of his care. Jessica is not going to take this challenge to her authority lightly. I know, I sighed, but I cannot just let her continue now that I understand what she has been doing. It was late afternoon when I pulled back into the driveway of my childhood home. Immediately, I sensed something was wrong. Dad's car was gone, and when I tried my key in the front door, it would not turn. Confused, I walked around to the back entrance. That key did not work either. I peered through windows, but saw no movement inside the unusually quiet house. Then my phone buzzed with a text message from my mother's number. We changed all the locks. You do not have a home anymore. Let us see how brave you are now. Haha. I stared at the screen in disbelief. She had actually locked me out of the house. I tried calling my father immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Calls to the house line rang unanswered. Standing in the backyard of my childhood home, locked out like a teenager who had missed curfew, I felt a surge of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. But beneath those immediate reactions was something deeper, a realization that this dramatic action represented the essence of who Jessica had always been. When she could not control through manipulation, she resorted to force. I called Mia, who immediately offered her guest room. Do not engage with her, she advised. This is exactly the kind of reactionary behavior that strengthens your case. Document everything. For the next 2 days, I attempted to contact my father through every means I could think of. I called neighbors, his few friends, even his doctors, trying to ensure he was safe. Most calls went unanswered, but one elderly neighbor confirmed seeing Jessica driving Dad somewhere the morning I had left to meet Mia. He did not look happy, the neighbor reported, but he went willingly enough. I consulted with Mia about my legal options. As an adult child, I had limited rights regarding access to my parents' home, regardless of the trust situation. However, given Dad's recent health issues and the evidence of Jessica's financial manipulations, we had grounds to request a wellness check and potentially petition for a review of Jessica's control over his affairs. The trust documentation gives us leverage, Mia explained as we prepared legal paperwork. Your grandmother clearly intended both you and your father to benefit. We can file for an emergency hearing based on concerns about misappropriation of assets. I spent those nights in Mia's comfortable guest room, but sleep eluded me. Had I pushed too hard, too fast? Was Dad okay? Had Jessica convinced him I was the villain in this scenario, as she had tried to do so many times before? I obsessively documented everything, creating a detailed timeline of events, saving Jessica's text messages, writing down every remembered conversation. Mia helped me file a formal legal notice to Jessica regarding my interest in the family trust and property, a necessary first step before more serious legal action. Meanwhile, Jessica escalated her campaign against me. I received a call from my principal in Chicago, concerned about accusations made against me by a family member, claiming I had abandoned my position to pursue other opportunities while lying about a family emergency. I know this is not true, my principal assured me. but I wanted you to be aware of the situation. Friends from my hometown began messaging asking if I was okay, saying they had heard troubling rumors about me taking advantage of my father's illness to claim family property. Jessica was clearly working overtime to shape the narrative in her favor. The emotional toll was immense. Despite knowing intellectually that this was Jessica's desperate attempt to maintain control, the old wounds of my childhood reopened. The feeling of never being good enough, of having my reality constantly questioned, of being painted as the problematic one, all came flooding back. I threw myself into research, learning about narcissistic personality traits and manipulative family dynamics. The patterns I discovered matched my experiences with Jessica with unnerving accuracy: the creation of a false public persona, the triangulation between family members, the inability to accept blame, the escalation when control is threatened. Understanding these patterns helped me maintain perspective, but the sense of homelessness cut deep. Not just the literal lack of access to the house, but the realization that I had never truly had the safe, nurturing childhood home that everyone deserves. While waiting for the legal system to move forward, I took proactive steps to protect myself. I contacted my bank to secure my financial accounts, reached out to my employer to formally document my leave of absence situation, and gathered character references from colleagues and friends who could vouch for me against Jessica's smear campaign. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learnt Jessica was telling people I had attempted to declare my father incompetent to gain control of family assets while he was vulnerable from his surgery. The exact opposite of the truth, but a narrative that played into her victim persona. Mia helped me file for a formal wellness check on my father through Adult Protective Services, citing concerns about isolation and potential coercion. We also sent a certified legal letter to Jessica outlining the evidence we had regarding the misappropriation of trust funds and setting a deadline for response before further legal action. Your mother is likely consulting her own lawyer by now, Mia warned. This is going to get messier before it gets better. She was right. Over the next day, we discovered Jessica had been contacting realtors about accelerating the sale of the family home, presumably to liquidate the asset before court intervention could freeze proceedings. I set up a security camera at the edge of the property, carefully placed on public land, but with a view of the house entrances to document who was coming and going. Through this, we confirmed Dad was still at the house, but rarely left except in Jessica's company. Instead of responding directly to Jessica's provocations, I focused on building the strongest possible legal case. Mia and I carefully constructed a multi-pronged approach, addressing the inheritance fraud, the concerns about Dad's well-being and autonomy, and my property rights as a beneficiary of the family trust. Exactly 2 days after being locked out of my childhood home, I received an unexpected email from Jessica's longtime lawyer, Thomas Woodward. "We have a problem. Call immediately." Thomas Woodward had represented my parents for over 20 years, handling everything from property matters to Jessica's numerous cease and desist letters against neighbours whose holiday decorations violated her aesthetic sensibilities. He had always struck me as Jessica's ally, so his urgent email was puzzling. With Mia listening in on speakerphone for legal support, I called his office. "Odessa, thank you for calling promptly." His voice sounded strained, lacking its usual smooth confidence. "I am in a difficult professional position and need to speak with you directly." "I am listening," I said cautiously. "I can no longer represent your mother in this matter. I have withdrawn as her counsel effective immediately." "Why would you tell me that?" I asked, exchanging confused glances with Mia. He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Because you need to know that Jessica attempted to have me file property transfer documents with forged signatures from your father. When I refused, she became irrational." My stomach dropped. "Is my father safe?" "That is my other concern," Woodward admitted. "In my last conversation with Jessica, she made statements that suggest she may be preventing Robert from communicating freely. I am bound by attorney-client privilege regarding specifics, but as an officer of the court, I have ethical obligations that supersede that relationship when I believe illegal activity may be occurring. We have already filed for a wellness check," I told him. "Good. There is something else you should know. Your father contacted me privately yesterday without Jessica's knowledge. He has been documenting her behaviour since your confrontation." Hope surged within me. "So he is okay. He is not buying into her version of events." "He is very much aware of the situation," Woodward confirmed. He asked me to tell you he has been recording Jessica's statements about the financial matters and her actions regarding the trust. He has evidence of her admitting to selling your grandmother's art collection and using those funds for personal expenses. Tears of relief filled my eyes. Dad was not only safe, but actively fighting back in his own careful way. There is an emergency hearing scheduled for tomorrow regarding your petition, Woodward continued. Robert plans to attend independently. Jessica does not know he has been in contact with me or that he intends to support your claims. After ending the call, Mia and I sat in stunned silence for a moment before she spoke. This changes everything. With your father's testimony and evidence, plus Woodward's ethical concerns, we have a much stronger case for immediate intervention. That night, I barely slept, cycling between hope that the situation would soon resolve and worry about what Jessica might do when cornered. She had already proven willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain control. What might she attempt when facing legal consequences for her actions? The next morning, Mia and I arrived at the county courthouse an hour early, prepared with all our documentation. We were directed to a small hearing room where a judge would review our emergency petition, requesting temporary control of the trust assets and a formal investigation into Jessica's financial management. 10 minutes before the scheduled start, Jessica strode in with an unfamiliar lawyer, her face a mask of dignified suffering. She gasped dramatically when she saw me turning to her attorney. That is her, the one trying to steal everything while my husband recovers from heart surgery. Her new lawyer, a young man who looked uncomfortable with the entire situation, guided her to seats on the opposite side of the room. Jessica pointedly avoided looking in my direction again, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue for the benefit of court personnel. At exactly 9 o'clock, the side door opened. Dad walked in alone, looking more determined than I had seen him in years. Jessica's performance faltered visibly, her mouth opening in shock. "Robert? What are you doing here? You should be resting. Did she force you to come?" She half rose from her seat, but Dad shook his head firmly. "No one forced me, Jessica. I am here of my own free will." The judge entered and the formal proceedings began. Our petition was read into the record, including concerns about Jessica's financial mismanagement, the lockout situation, and questions about Dad's autonomy in decision-making. When Jessica's turn to respond came, she launched into a practiced narrative of devotion and sacrifice, painting herself as the dedicated caregiver, protecting family assets from an estranged daughter's greed. "My husband has been too ill to manage these affairs," she insisted. "As his wife of 34 years, I have only done what was necessary to protect our interests during his recovery." The judge turned to my father. "Mr. Harper, given that your health is central to these claims, would you like to address the court directly?" Dad stood slowly, his voice steady despite his still recovering condition. "Your Honour, I am here to support my daughter's petition entirely. My wife has been controlling our finances without my full knowledge or consent for years." Jessica's face contorted with rage. "Robert, how dare you?" The judge silenced her with a sharp look before turning back to Dad. "Do you have evidence to support these claims?" Dad nodded, producing a small digital recorder from his pocket. "I do. With my lawyer's advice, I have been recording conversations in my home over the past 3 days." Jessica's new attorney leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear, likely warning her about the implications of recorded admissions. The judge allowed the recordings to be entered into evidence. In them, Jessica could be clearly heard admitting to selling artwork that technically belonged to me, moving money between accounts without Dad's knowledge, and most damning explicitly threatening to fabricate medical concerns about Dad's mental capacity if he continued to support my claims to the trust. As the recordings played, Jessica's face drained of colour. Her carefully constructed narrative was collapsing in real time, her own words betraying the truth she had worked so hard to conceal. In the most powerful recording, Jessica could be heard saying, "I had to take care of that money myself because neither of you appreciates what it takes to maintain our position. Your mother never respected me, leaving all that art to Odessa, who would just waste it on her meaningless hobby. I deserved that money after everything I have done for this family." When the recordings finished, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Jessica stared straight ahead, her expression unreadable. The judge reviewed the documentation we had provided, including the trust paperwork and financial records, then glanced at Jessica's lawyer. "Does your client wish to respond to these recordings?" After a whispered consultation, her attorney replied, "At this time, my client exercises her right not to make further statements that might impact potential future proceedings." The judge nodded, then delivered his ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting temporary control of the Harper Family Trust to Robert Harper and Odessa Harper jointly. All assets are frozen pending full financial review. Mrs. Harper is ordered to provide full accounting of all trust transactions within 10 business days. He continued, looking directly at Jessica. Additionally, given concerns about the current living situation, Mrs. Harper will vacate the family residence within 24 hours, while this matter proceeds to full hearing. The court takes allegations of financial exploitation very seriously, particularly when they involve health-vulnerable individuals. Jessica finally broke her silence, jumping to her feet. This is absurd. That is my home. Where am I supposed to go? That will be for you to arrange, Mrs. Harper, the judge replied firmly. The property is held in the family trust according to the documentation provided with your husband and daughter as primary beneficiaries. Your temporary removal from the premises is necessary to ensure their unimpeded access to trust assets while this matter is resolved. As the hearing concluded, Jessica stormed out without looking at either Dad or me, her new lawyer, hurrying after her with a briefcase full of now useless counter-arguments. Dad and I stood together in the empty courtroom, both processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. You recorded her, I said softly. I did not know you had that in you. He smiled sadly. Neither did I until I saw how far she was willing to go. Locking you out was the final straw. I realized I had enabled her behavior for far too long. We embraced a genuine hug, unmarred by Jessica's watchful presence for the first time in years. As we walked out of the courthouse together, Dad looked simultaneously exhausted and unburdened. Let us go home, he said. Our home. With court officers escorting us, we returned to the family house to ensure Jessica complied with the order to leave. She was already packing when we arrived, filling suitcases with clothing and personal items while shooting venomous glares in our direction. Happy now, she spat as she dragged a suitcase downstairs. 34 years of marriage, and this is my reward. Thrown out of my own home by my husband and the daughter I sacrificed everything for. Dad looked at her with a mixture of sadness and resolution. This was your doing, Jessica, not ours. You chose control over love again and again. Her face crumpled momentarily before the mask of righteous indignation returned. You will regret this, both of you. With that final threat, she wheeled her suitcase out the door to where a rideshare waited at the curb. As the car pulled away, Dad and I stood in the doorway of our family home, both aware that while one battle had been won, the war was far from over. Jessica would not surrender her control without exhausting every possible avenue of attack. But for the first time, we were facing her united with truth on our side. That night, Dad and I sat in the kitchen drinking tea, the house feeling strangely peaceful despite the tumultuous events of the day. I am sorry, he said suddenly, for all the years I let her treat you that way, for not being stronger. I reached across the table to take his hand. You are being strong now. That is what matters. We began the slow process of rebuilding trust, father and daughter reconnecting after years of Jessica's interference. The road ahead would be challenging with legal proceedings, financial investigations, and Jessica's inevitable counterattacks to navigate. But for the first time since returning to my childhood home, I felt something I had not expected to find here again, hope. 6 months passed from that day in the courthouse each week, bringing new challenges and small victories as Dad and I rebuilt our life together in the family home. Jessica had not gone quietly, launching multiple legal challenges to the trust arrangement and continuing her campaign to damage my reputation around town. But with each proceeding, her position weakened as more evidence of her financial misconduct came to light. The formal investigation into the trust revealed Jessica had sold 17 pieces from Grandma Eleanor's art collection, using the proceeds nearly $300,000 for personal expenses, including secret cosmetic procedures, a timeshare in Florida she had told Dad was a gift from a grateful client, and a substantial private investment account in her name only. After 3 months of legal maneuvering, the court issued its final ruling. The family trust would remain under the joint control of Dad and me, with professional oversight from an independent fiduciary. Jessica would be permitted supervised visitation at the family home only with advance notice, and she was required to attend therapy as part of the settlement agreement. She now lived in a condominium across town, maintaining her social connections through careful narrative management. To her friends, she was the victim of a daughter's manipulation and a husband's weakness during illness. Few knew the full truth, and she preferred it that way. Dad's health improved dramatically without the constant stress of walking on eggshells. His cardiologist noted the improvement at his 6-month checkup, commenting that emotional well-being often played a bigger role in recovery than people realized. For my part, I extended my leave from teaching in Chicago to focus on healing our family wounds. Using my skills as an art teacher, I established a small art therapy program at the local community center, specifically designed for survivors of emotional abuse. Working with others who understood the unique pain of psychological manipulation became a crucial part of my own recovery process. "You always make beauty from pain," Dad observed one evening as I showed him the community mural my therapy group had created. "That is your gift." We worked together to reconnect with extended family members who had been alienated by Jessica over the years. My cousins from Dad's side, whom I had barely known growing up, became regular visitors. Dad's sister Susan, the gallery curator Jessica had so often criticized, became a particular ally, helping us properly catalogue and display the remaining pieces of Grandma Eleanor's collection throughout the house. Each day brought new revelations about the extent of Jessica's control: bills for services I never knew about, correspondences intercepted, relationships intentionally damaged. Dad and I worked through these discoveries together, processing our anger and grief, learning to trust our own perceptions again after years of gaslighting. The hardest part for me was acknowledging the complexity of my feelings toward Jessica. Despite everything, she was still my mother. There were moments from childhood, rare but real, when she had shown genuine pride in my accomplishments, or comfort when I was hurt. Those memories made the betrayal cut deeper, but also reminded me that people are rarely all good or all bad. "Do you think she can change?" I asked Dad one evening as we sat in the garden he had reclaimed as his personal project. He considered the question carefully, pruning shears paused mid-cut. "I think she can improve with proper help, but true change would require acknowledging the harm she has caused, and I am not sure Jessica is capable of that level of self-reflection." We established careful boundaries for Jessica's supervised visits. The first few were tense, filled with passive-aggressive comments and martyred sighs. But over time, constrained by the structure of supervision and her required therapy, she began to interact more normally, though always with an undercurrent of resentment. During one visit, when the supervisor stepped outside to take a call, Jessica leaned toward me. "You think you have won, do not you?" "This was never about winning," I replied calmly. "It was about truth and safety." She studied me for a moment. "You are more like me than you realize, Odessa. That determination, that willingness to fight. You get that from me, not your father." The observation unsettled me especially because it contained a grain of truth. My strength and resilience had been forged partly in response to her control, a determination to define myself on my own terms despite her influence. As summer turned to fall, I faced a decision about my future. My teaching position in Chicago remained open, the school having granted my extended leave given the circumstances. But I had built something meaningful here too, both with Dad and through my art therapy program. "You should go back," Dad said when I raised the question. "I am well now, and you have your own life to live." "Are you sure?" "What about Jessica?" I worried about her regaining influence once I was gone. He smiled, the confidence in his expression still new but increasingly natural. "I have learned my lesson. Besides, we have legal protections in place now, and I have reconnected with friends she drove away. I will not be isolated again." We decided I would return to Chicago for the spring semester, but visit regularly, maintaining our joint oversight of the trust and our newly strengthened relationship. The thought of leaving brought mixed emotions, but I knew this time would be different. I was leaving a true home, not escaping a prison. The week before my departure, I sorted through the last of the boxes in my childhood bedroom, deciding what to take back to Chicago and what to leave in what had become a real home. Among forgotten school reports and teenage journals, I found a drawing I had made at age 7, a colourful rendering of our family standing before the house. In my childish depiction, Jessica stood tall and bright in a yellow dress, one hand holding Dad's, the other mine. We all had enormous smiles, the sun shining above our triangular rooftop. I remembered creating this picture. Remembered Jessica's rare moment of genuine pleasure when I presented it to her. Remembered how it had hung on our refrigerator for nearly a month before disappearing. I showed it to Dad that evening. "She kept it," I said softly. "All these years." He nodded. "There was love there, Odessa. Twisted and conditional, but real in its way. That is what makes this all so painful." I understood then that healing would not mean forgetting the good moments, or denying the complexity of family bonds. It meant acknowledging the full truth, including the painful parts, and moving forward with eyes open. The night before I returned to Chicago, Dad and I sat on the porch swing, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "What I regret most," he said quietly, "is not teaching you earlier that love should never require surrendering your truth or yourself. That real love makes you more who you are, not less." "I know that now," I assured him. And it is not too late for either of us. The journey back to wholeness would be ongoing. Jessica remained a complicated presence in our lives, capable of both genuine moments of connection and sudden manipulative maneuvers. The legal battles had settled, but left emotional scars that would take years to fully heal. But as I packed my car for the drive back to Chicago, I carried with me something I had not possessed during my first escape from home: a sense of resolution of problems faced, rather than fled. The locks on the doors had been changed again, but this time I had keys that would always work, literal and metaphorical. True bravery, I had learned, is not about fighting back with cruelty, even when cruelty is directed at you. It is about standing firm in your truth, even when those who should love you try to break you. Home is not about locks and walls, it is about where you can be authentically yourself without fear. If my story has resonated with you, please know you are not alone. Emotional manipulation leaves invisible scars that are no less real than physical ones. Share your experiences in the comments below, subscribe if you want to hear more stories of healing and growth. And remember that standing in your truth is never wrong, even when it comes at a high cost. Like this video if you found strength in this journey, and know that whatever locks others may change in your life, the key to your authentic self always remains in your hands. Thank you for listening to my story.